It's Daz. It feels like we live in a different world since the last time I spoke to you. Last November, President Donald J. Trump won the United States election, and there was a lot of mixed emotions from that win. And now we're looking at, in the first 3 going into 4 weeks, some of the things that his administration's done. Whether that's the creation of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, with Elon Musk heading it, who's already a controversial figure, and allegedly was doing a Nazi salute, and seems to take his son everywhere with him, including to the side of the Oval Office where his son was picking his nose, as kids do, and then telling President Trump that you're not the president, or telling him to shut up. Or the fact that most of his picks are being nominated, like RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, very polarizing figures. To seeing lots of ICE raids occur across major US cities, to seeing the Department of Homeland Security headed by Kristi Noem, or seeing Tom Homan go after different areas, and it's just, we haven't seen anything like it, as well as Gitmo being used, and now El Salvador prisons, which are no joke. So for those who really wanted reform as far as like the country getting rid of illegal immigrants, or those who wanted the migrant crisis solved, it seems like that's getting done. Even the war in Ukraine seems like it might be nearing an end, with talks of Ukraine having to accept its defeat, Trump and Putin meeting. And one of the more surprising things, but not so surprising, is that Trump announced that the United States will seize Gaza and make it the new Riviera of the Middle East, which is honestly really sad for those who lost their lives and homes in Palestine, and now they're being forced out. So much has occurred, and I remember all the speculation there was about what this presidency would bring. And outside of the presidency, we have planes going down like every day, just crashes. Some of the more notable crashes was the one at Ronald Reagan Airport in DC, where there was a lot of figure skaters on it. And then we're just seeing like private planes crash as well. And this isn't just in the United States, it's happening globally. Another thing that happened toward the end of last year that I don't feel I got a chance to really talk about is the fog. So towards the end of the year, I was really bogged down with work. I really wanted to make a video so bad, but I was traveling for work. I no longer travel for work. I now work at home. But even though I do so, again, work is work, and I work in tech, and I work now in a more support related role, so I'm doing more online than I normally would do. So it's taken up a lot of my time learning all these new skills, and then traveling was just its own beast. I'm so glad I'm not traveling anymore when I see all these planes going down. It makes me feel like someone is trying to scare people out of traveling by plane, or someone may be trying to get rid of certain people they may not like. Maybe these people are blood sacrifices to achieve certain things. The fog that happened. So I actually had an encounter with the fog when I was in Canada working. I was on my way back to the Toronto airport from, I believe it was Napanee was the town. I worked in several Ontario towns, and our relations with Canada are not good right now. Trump in the 51st state talks, and him calling Prime Minister Trudeau Governor Trudeau, and he's not letting up on it. And I hear Canadians are boycotting American products, trying to decenter America from their lives. The tariffs that Trudeau hit Trump back with, and then Mexico agreed to send down troops, so they delayed their tariffs at least for a month, but Gulf of Mexico is no more. It's the Gulf of America now. Sorry, I had to sidetrack and talk about it because there's just so much to unpack there, and it's crazy. With the fog, though, when I was driving to the airport, I felt like I was going to crash my rental car, and I drive in all kinds of conditions. I've driven in almost all 50 states. I've driven in Canada, in Alberta, and in Ontario. And it's not driving that's an issue for me. It's the conditions of the road or other drivers at times, like when you have really rough drivers in Florida. When I was driving, it was so hard to see. Like, it felt like there was just like this mist, and it wouldn't let up, and it got thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker. And there were times where I was like, do I need to just pull over to the shoulder? But at the same time, like, I started this drive at 3 a.m. to make a 10 a.m. flight, which sounds insane, but when you do an international flight, you want to be there like 4 hours, or at least 2 hours before, because you never know if you're going to get extra questioning from customs. You got to clear TSA. Even though I have pre-check and global entry, I always still show up early, no matter how many times I've been to the airport, like The amount of times that I went through the Toronto or Vancouver airport, like I knew them like the back of my hand, but I still show up early. Same thing with LAX because it's a major airport in the United States. So I'm driving and I feel like I'm not going to make it. And I saw some cars literally just using their hazards, and I felt like turning mine on too, but I just kept pushing through. But I really did have to crawl for a while in that drive. It was really frustrating. And then I found out that this fog wasn't just unique to where I was in Ontario. It was happening all over the United States. It was happening in Europe. It was happening in other parts of the world. And it made me wonder, like, what was this fog? And then people started to get really sick after they encountered that fog. And some people on their Ring cameras saw like what looked like it was snowing outside or some kind of white powder coming down from the sky. And then people were sick. And what's ironic is, so not immediately after I encountered the fog, but like toward the end of the year, I'd say like actually it was around New Year's in January, I feel super ill. And admittedly, I had been working 12s nonstop, going on planes back and forth between Canada and the United States. And I had been exposed to COVID in the ICU I was working in med-surg, because they had an outbreak and everyone had to wear masks and stuff. But and God knows what else I was exposed to, and it is that time of year. But we also had what they called like a quademic going on, where there was like COVID, influenza, bird flu, and that RSV. And then I know in China they had something weird going on for a time as well. But I was so sick I could barely speak. But like it was like my last day of work where I was like the most messed up. But then what was even worse is I got delayed 3 days getting home because a giant snowstorm hit Kansas City, so no one could get in and out. They cleared it just enough to let our football team out, the Kansas City Chiefs, which I'm sure the Super Bowl is another point of contention for Americans right now, because everybody was so sure that the Kansas City Chiefs were going to win so Travis Kelce could propose to Taylor Swift and it could be happily ever after. Whereas the Eagles won instead, and there was no three-peat, which would have made Patrick like the GOAT. But when I saw Tom Brady doing the commentary in every commercial, I'm like, there's no way he's going to let Patrick usurp his title. Because one thing I've noticed from watching football, and I'm not like the biggest sports fanatic, I have really no dog in this fight. I'm a bandwagon fan. I like a good game. And I know a lot of it could be rigged or staged. Every time that Tom Brady's ever been in the picture when it comes to the Kansas City Chiefs, it feels like the Chiefs just don't play their best, or they take a huge dive. Like in 2021, they went to the Super Bowl and they lost miserably. It was a shutout game, no points. And this was Tom Brady's last game. In 2019, the Chiefs almost made it the playoffs, but were knocked out by the Patriots. I just see a pattern here. The halftime show, so many people had stuff to say about the halftime show, whether they're calling it political, racial, symbolic. Kendrick Lamar, as far as where he stands in all of this, just like anyone else, he's in the industry. He had that beef with Drake. Drake was known for a while to mess around with people that were underage, and then Kendrick drew attention to it in their beef when they were going back and forth last year, and he put out the song Not Like Us, which was a huge banger for a lot of people. And he performed that song at the Super Bowl, and he had the little A on his neck for like A minor, which is also in music an A minor. And a lot of people are saying too, a lot of this focus on going after Drake is because pedophilia is out in the open as well, with these Diddy trials, which are about to begin next month in March. Interestingly enough, where I've talked about Diddy a few times on this channel, Diddy was arrested in Midtown. So was Epstein. And Epstein, of course, didn't live to have his trial, but Diddy, as far as we know, is still alive. You know who else is in Midtown being held? Luigi Mangione, the young man who killed the United Healthcare CEO. So just a lot of strange things about Midtown Manhattan as well. And I feel like every time I talk about one thing, I go down a rabbit hole, and I'm trying to get back to the point I was making. With that all said, the Super Bowl didn't go the way a lot of people thought it would. The Eagles won, but I also thought it was fitting because the eagle is a sign of the United States. It's the animal mascot, even though, fun fact, the original animal mascot was a rattlesnake. Hence the Don't Tread on Me flag that came from the days of Benjamin Franklin. But the eagle is today's animal, and something I just want to share with you guys, I don't know if I ever did. When I took a road trip last fall, it was the last road trip I took. I went to some state. I flew into Indiana, we drove to Ohio, and then we made our way down to West Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, back into North Carolina, into Tennessee and Kentucky, and we ended there and flew home. The reason we did all that is because we were trying to see all the national parks. When I was in, I believe it was Tennessee at that point, because it was at Smoky Mountains, and I have the strangest relationship when it comes to the Smoky Mountains. I tried to go to them in 2021 with my family in December, but it was too windy. It would have been way too dangerous trying to drive up there, and then we had a vehicle that could easily blow off, so we didn't go that year. And so in 2024 we finally made it. We stayed in Asheville. This is before it got hit by the Hurricane Helene flooding, and it was literally like a week or two right before this all occurred. And when I was in Asheville, I had this in my mind because I'd been to Sedona that same year last year. I haven't stayed in the Mount Shasta area, but I've driven on it on my way down to Sacramento on I-5 from Oregon. And they say these places are vortexes of energy, especially these more beautiful places, right? So Asheville's one of them. And I remember when I was there in Asheville, I noticed the architecture of the hotel was really interesting. And I know some people say, oh, you're thinking too far into things, but there are people who do build things on certain ley lines or points, and they believe in sacred geometry. My suitcase falling, and then my mom's suitcase falling. It was just so strange. The energy there was just weird. But anyways, when we were at Smoky, we finally made it. We walked a little bit of the Appalachian Trail, and then we left, and then we were driving. We got to, I believe it's Pigeon's Forge. I noticed bald eagle land, in the creek area. And when I saw it, I was like, I don't ever see eagles in person. I don't know why I don't see them, but I was like, is this a symbol of something? And it just, reminded me. I took a picture of it, but it wasn't very good. 2 weeks later, they had that major flooding. There was a lot of damage. Trump really focused on them. That and the LA fires that also occurred. And it just was symbolic to me seeing that eagle, because it makes me think of the team, the Eagles. Philly is part of the 13 colonies, that state, and I just felt like it was symbolic that America's back, because a lot of Trump's term is about America being back. It's America's golden age. It's America's imperialist age. This is why we're talking about taking Canada as the 51st state, or Greenland, or making a big deal about Mexico's cartels and declaring them as terrorists, which I am not supporting at all. The use of drug flow into the country from cartels. They've done a lot of terrible things and terrorized the Mexican people. I can say that as someone who has family in Mexico and is of Mexican descent on my father's side. It's crazy because I feel like part of that is I feel like the U.S. is on a land grab. They are Russia, China. We're in an imperialist age. And then even talks of taking back the Panama Canal. What is this talk of going into Gaza? Is America trying to get Jerusalem? This is just food for thought. I found it fitting. A lot of people were taken by surprise. The halftime show was the most watched. It even topped Michael Jackson's, which was the most watched at one point. So all of that happened. And I know I was talking about getting sick. So I got sick. I was sick for I'd say 2 weeks. I lost my voice. It really was terrible because I was starting this new job, and then I had to keep meeting people, and I felt like I was coughing every 5 seconds, and my voice was half gone. Obviously, I'm healthy now, and I do think something was in that fog. And I do think between the fog, and then this was around the time a lot of weird lights were in the sky, all these drones, and people were talking about UFOs, and they were unidentified drones or UAPs, unidentified. It was just a lot going on to end 2024. Then 2025 came in with a bang. Louisiana, New Orleans, where the Super Bowl was held, they had that whole shooting and driver drive into the crowd. Many people lost their lives. And some people say it's a blood sacrifice. Then in Vegas, there was that Tesla that blew up. And here we go again. Donald Trump at the Super Bowl in New Orleans. Elon Musk, he's the owner of Tesla vehicles. He's now a prominent figure. We're hearing about him every day. He looks so eerie, though, standing next to Trump. I'm not going to lie, in that outfit. I know he's on the spectrum, and I know that there's a lot to say about him and the obsession with X and his jokes about being from another dimension. Even the idea that he's from South Africa, and there was this whole debate that the right almost tore themselves apart over the whole H-1B1 visas. The fact that Trump withdrew aid from South Africa because probably Elon Musk was advising him to, because of the whole idea of the farmers and everything. And Elon Musk, he grew up in apartheid South Africa, so that's not a surprise. And the things that he's doing, I do wonder what's going to happen with that, because in one way they are uncovering some of the corruption in the United States government, and they are chopping programs. Like they chopped USAID. They did away with the Department of Education. They're talking about getting rid of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. They fired 4 people from it in New York for housing migrants in expensive or luxury hotels. To me, this is just like, it's like every day I'm watching of the United States government is like a new soap opera episode, and it does make you wonder what is going to come of the next 4 years. But what I will say is, compared to the Biden administration, where we saw a lot happen and it felt like more happened to the US, it feels like the US is the actor in this case, for better or worse. To me, these are signs that something has to give. In the heavens, we have signs, whether you're talking our weather with major wildfires, like the Santa Ana winds always happen in California. Like Joe Rogan talked about this before, and it was just that time where they blew to the point where they caused fires. It was really devastating to LA. Like, I used to live in LA, in Culver City, and I've worked a lot in LA, and I love Pasadena. They were hit really hard by it. Altadena, the Palisades, Hollywood was hit by it. Hollywood was burning. And of course, they had made a comment at the Golden Globes. They made a joke about God getting 0, people cheering for him or something of that nature. And then what happened? They were on fire. There was mixed information because they were saying, oh, they found an arsonist or they found this person. There was this theory about a smart city being built in LA. LA is where they're going to hold the 2026 Olympics, well, part of them. And I've always wondered with LA's traffic and then just LA, like, is, I think, beautiful geographically and everything, and I love it. It's one of my favorite cities, but it also has a lot of problems, a lot of smog, a lot of pollution, a lot of homelessness. It makes me wonder. It's kind of like Kansas City holding the World Cup, or no, 2028 for LA and 2026 for Kansas City for the World Cup, and I wonder how Kansas City is going to manage traffic. Of course, the problem for Kansas City is it's really small and needs more infrastructure updates, which it's getting. But LA, like now, I know they were working on LAX Wing, because every time I'd go, there would always be work being done. Like they moved all the rental cars into its own rental center, which they hadn't had before. But now they're saying some of the areas they wanted Olympics was some of the areas that burned down. And there was this plan that someone came up with about a smart city in like 2028, and LA being like this city with a lot more AI. And you see figures like Elon Musk talking about AI, you have Sam Altman, you have Larry Ellison, you have all these tech guys. This is the presidency of the tech oligarchs and of Silicon Valley. And it's interesting they align themselves with the more right-wing politicians. I do think LA is going to get a rebuild with more AI. It definitely could use an update as far as its architecture, but most of the United States is behind infrastructure-wise compared to other nations. And there's just so much that is happening. I'd like to know you guys' thoughts. I know this video is more me sharing my thoughts, giving you the news that's been happening, rambling on. Feel free to share your thoughts, your opinions, if you agree or disagree with me, if you got other news you want to share with me. It was awesome talking to you guys. I've missed you all. I hope you have a wonderful finish to your week, a nice weekend, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you again for tuning in. God bless. Until next time.